There are many different makes and models of 3D printers. In this video, we're going to show you the basics of a 3D printer, how to load filament, how to print, how to troubleshoot common problems.
Every 3D printer will have a build plate, an extruder, a place to load filament, and an information screen. Some 3D printers will provide their own software to use, but there's also free software out there that is compatible with most 3D printers. Let's start with the build plate. This is where your project is built. The filament is melted onto the surface of the build plate and your design becomes three-dimensional. Not all build plates and surfaces look exactly the same. Some are glass, some are made of thermoplastic like PEI. Certain surfaces may require you to put down painter's tape so that your job will adhere properly. Some filaments require you to use a glue stick for better adherence. It's also really important to keep your build plate clean. Each manufacturer will have recommended tips on how to do this, so be sure to check for that. Build plates can become very hot before, during, and after printing, so always be careful and never touch the build plate or extruder during a print job. Likewise, if you plan to have this on the public floor for patrons to look at, make sure you have some kind of protective cover over the printer, like an enclosure. Next up is the extruder, where the melted plastic or filament comes out of. There is a cold end of the extruder where a motor and other pieces are found and where the filament is first pushed in, and a hot end, including a nozzle. The nozzle is where the filament comes out. One problem that you might encounter is a filament jam. Filament can get jammed in the extruder both in the cold and hot ends. If your filament gets jammed in the nozzle, it's possible to clean it out by pushing in new filament. So you heat up your extruder to a slightly higher temperature than the one you were using, for example, 240 degrees instead of 230, so the stuck filament will melt and extrude. Now I'm going to show you how to actually load the filament. Each 3D printer will look slightly different, but loading the filament is usually pretty standard. First, you'll need to heat up the extruder, so you'll head to your information screen and select Load Filament. Again, this process might be different depending on your model, so be sure to check the instructions for how to do this. Once it's ready to load, you'll take your filament spool, which should fit onto a holder, whether on the top or on the side of your printer, and you'll insert the filament into the cold end of the extruder. It's fairly simple. The motor will help to feed the filament into the extruder, and the new filament will actually push out any old filament, and you should start to see your new filament color come out of the nozzle. Some printers ask if you're seeing the right color, and you'll hit yes and be ready to print. So once your filament is fully loaded and ready to go, the last step will be to print your object. Again, depending on your machine, you may save the file onto an SD card and insert that to print, and choose the design you want to print from there. This process will be different for each machine. You might be doing this wirelessly from your computer. Depending on where the machine is placed and who the main users will be, staff or patrons, you might want to choose one method over the other.
All I've gone over here is just the start of using your 3D printer. 3D printing for your library will likely come down to trial and error, but know that you have the support of your manufacturer and online forums for each different 3D printer. Don't be afraid to explore and play, and know that everything is fixable.